especially amongst women, more used to sort of being right in the center and being surrounded. My voice is loud enough, in case some of you were wondering that it's my voice that wouldn't carry. But first of all, let me tell you that this is a delightful way to start a Sunday morning. I started it a little bit earlier by having breakfast with my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter. And so it's fitting that from that, I should come to this. I am one of the 5 firstborn women in my family who are still alive. My mother, who's 95, myself, my daughter, my granddaughter, and now our great-granddaughter, who's 3. And so it's always delightful for me to come and talk to women about many of the issues that impact us. And when Sonia asked me to speak, she wanted me to talk a little bit about my journey, how I got here, what I thought the challenges were, and then how I see the future for the city, the role that women can play. And I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning and I totally changed what I was going to say. And so I want to talk about the early challenges first. I was 9 years old when my parents emigrated to England. A woman coming with 4 kids, not speaking a word of English, to a very cold and miserable rainy country called England, which is my other home. And so we were transplanted from India right into England. And at a time back in '62, when there were not that many other immigrants around, especially from the Punjab, there were some men, quite a few men who worked in the factories, who'd come out after World War II, but the families hadn't started to join them. So when we went to school, my brothers and I, there weren't other students there who looked like us. And I think that's where I want to start off, where some of the biggest challenges were. It was being transplanted. And I think there are many Canadians who come today to Canada when they first arrive. It's that feeling of being transplanted, taken from your roots and put somewhere else, where the language, the food, everything is different. But the biggest thing for me was going to school. We didn't have ESL. We didn't have anything, but I did have one thing that was amazing: a wonderful headmistress of my school. And she thought if she showed me pictures of India, that would make me feel comfortable and at home, because we didn't share a language. So she would take me to her office once a day and she would go through pictures of India, which were absolutely beautiful. But they were nothing like the India that I had left behind. I had left behind Punjab, and she had spent some time in India when her dad was in the military, in the armed forces, as part of the colonial sort of settlements. She'd been in the hill stations and in the mountains, and it all looked absolutely amazing. But I don't really think at that time I realized she was trying to make me feel at home. At that time I just thought she was showing me pretty pictures. So anyway, because language in those days was by immersion, and being the age I was, the language came. And my next challenge, I think, for me was when I got called to the headmistress's office. Because the way we were taught about school, because I did go to school in India, it was a very strict, very authoritarian kind of a place. So when you got called to the headmaster's office, or headmistress's office in this case, I can tell you I almost peed my pants, right? So I waited. And when she took me in, she said, "We're moving you from the E stream to the A stream." Because in England, classes were streamed. And, and what took me to that spot, and I always talk about it, was my teachers. It was my English teacher who spent the time talking to me and bringing me books that were not really for grade 11 or grade 11, for 11-year-olds or 10-year-olds. She would bring me books, story books that were for a much younger age, and I loved to read, so I read while the rest of the class was doing everything else. I would just literally sit there and read. So as I went through school, you look at the other challenges was, how do you make friends? Well, I was very, very fortunate. I had lots of people who invited me to birthday parties and things. But that came after. But I remember when I was new, I would put on my school uniform. And how do you get to school when you don't know the language? Well, I knew there were some girls who lived down the street. I went to an all-girls school down the street, and they would have the same uniform as I did. And I'd get on the bus from the same bus stop as they did. Then I would get off at the same bus stop as they did and just follow them into the school. However, one day they decided they were not going to get on the bus. They were going to walk. And I think because they realized that this little girl was walking behind them, they decided to take a rather convoluted way to school, which was totally unfamiliar to me. Which walking routes are not usually the same as your bus routes. And I have never been that scared in my life. Here you are walking down beautiful streets, but you don't know where you are. And who do you call for help? I couldn't even remember my own address. And when you don't have the language, how do you ask? And I just kept walking in a certain way, and eventually I saw other kids who had a similar uniform, same uniform as I did, and I followed them to school. And that day was an important lesson for me that has guided me for the rest of my life. Do not follow others, because you don't know where they're going to lead you. And I decided that day that I had to learn that route for myself, how I could walk to school, how I could get on the bus, and also that it was up to me, that it wasn't the girls' fault, though I was very angry with them at first. It was my fault, I felt, that I didn't know where I was. And I shouldn't have left the bus stop. I should have got on the bus, because at least then I would have known where to get off. But in this case, so that was a big challenge, which many women who are born here, grow up speaking English, don't have. But young children and young women who are transplanted into this country have challenges very similar to that. And then when you're going through school, you know, many people have many role models. In those days, my role models were my teachers and my books, because I loved reading. And I decided I was going to be an airline pilot. And everybody laughed at me and they said, women don't do that. And my dad never said women don't do that, but he kind of humored me. I failed my height test because I wasn't quite tall enough. I was half an inch too short. So I became a teacher. And I'm throwing things around. So I became a teacher, and I have never, ever regretted it. Teaching has added so much to my life, and I'll always see myself as a teacher. But while I was at school, were there other challenges? Absolutely. It would be my uncles telling my dad I couldn't wear a skirt. It would be like, you can't go on school trips. You can't go hiking. You can't take judo, you can't take fencing. You can't possibly do the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. They are just so challenging. But I had an amazing father and mother, though she never appeared quite supportive then, but in hindsight, she was the strength. And one thing I learned from my parents was that no doors were closed to you. So my father would say yes to my uncles when they said she should really wear pants to go to school. And then I would say, but Dad, you should see all the girls who wear the pants. When they get to school, they take them off, they put makeup on, and you should see how they look. At least I leave home the way I am, and I come home the way I am. And so there were those challenges as well around the male-female roles and the cultural clash that happens. So I went off to university, and often people say to me, you got accepted at Oxford and you decided to go to university to Manchester? Manchester was further away from home. And I got to stay in residence, right? But the other thing is, going to university was also transformational. Because for the first time, I was away from home, which many of us are when we go away. And I became a teacher. I taught in England. Then Margaret Thatcher came, and some of you might have heard of Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher, we called her. And we decided to come overseas, but in between there were some other challenges as well. My dad had said to me, if you meet anyone, please let us know first, right? So when I went to university, I fell in love. He just happened to be an English, Scot, Irish mix, Caucasian. And I followed my dad's advice. I told them. And I can tell you that back in 1971, a South Asian girl from India marrying a white guy from England, it created major challenges for both sides of the family. My husband's side of the family was convinced they were going to find him murdered and lying in a ditch somewhere. And literally. And my mother-in-law would cry because every time she said, but what will happen when you have children? And my husband would say the most outrageous names I'd never heard of, that we were going to name them. And in hindsight, it was very cruel, right? And on the other hand, my parents' thing was, you have so much more potential. You know, what do his parents do? They live in rental homes. Well, come on, that's not acceptable. Not just talking about the cultural clashes that happened at that time. And after I did get married to my husband, what we found was that in the early days, we could bring the traffic to a halt just by walking downtown. When we would walk down Bradford, I can even remember a driver getting out of the bus and saying to my husband, she's not Indian, is she? And my husband just looked at her and said, she's my wife. And we walked on. And me going to the clubs that my in-laws were part of, and being asked, so where do you come from? Where did you come from? And I thought they meant that day, so I said from Manchester, because that's where I went to university. They said, no, really, where do you come from? I said, from Leamington Spa, because that's where I grew up. And then I moved on, and then my husband came after me laughing, and he said, really, Ginny, they were wanting to know why your color is brown, right? They were asking more than that. So there were those challenges as well, and one story do I have to tell you, your identity, and I want to talk a little bit about identity, is that I went to school and I was quite oblivious of a lot of racism or others, because when there's only one or two of you in a school, you tend to integrate fairly well, especially when there's not too many other choices. And you get invited to parties the same as all the other kids, and your parents go into debt trying to get you a special frock so that when you go to the birthday party, you don't look like the odd person out. But I can remember when I was 17, and I was elected head girl for the school. Those who grew up in England will know what that means. I was a prefect and then a head girl. And we had hot meals at school, which I think every school should have here as well. Anyway, there we were having our hot meal, which was made on site and then served. And some new girls had come in. And they were from India. They had long hair, braids and everything. And a girl, one of my very best friends, said, spread out. And I looked at her and I said, why? She said, we don't want them sitting with us. And I said to her, well, why not? And she said, because they're Indian. And I said to her, so am I. And she said, no, you're not. You're one of us. I still get emotional when I think about that. So all my life, I have fought stereotypes and putting people into holes. you're either this, you're that, you're either tall or you're short, which you are, or you're either brown or you're black or you're white, or you're either well off or you're very poor. You can do this, you can't do that. And I think for me, my life journey has been about being me. And who is Ginny? She was born in India, grew up in England, did her education in England, and then came to Canada. How can I separate the different parts of me? How can I separate the first 9 years that I'm very, very proud of my roots, where I grew up in a tiny village, the firstborn grandchild on both sides of the family and absolutely doted upon, to coming to England where I had an amazingly enriching education and a wonderful life, and where the Cotswolds and walks in the Cotswolds are just as much part of my fabric as a walk back on a village in the Punjab. And now a walk along the seawall here in Vancouver, or going down to the pier in White Rock, or many other places. So when people say, who are you? Ginny is a composite of her life experiences, good and bad. And to me, that's what challenges are in life. How do you take on those experiences? Sometimes when people just hear my voice, they haven't seen my face, they'll say, oh my God, we thought you were just 100% English. I'm thinking, I've lived in Canada since 75. Yes, my accent has stayed, but that's just the way it is. And then even within the Indian community, people say, but you don't look Indian. And I want to say, have you ever been to India? Northern India is an area that was invaded after group, and is really very much a mongrel landscape, where there are so many cultures and clashes, with Alexander the Great coming over there, the invasions from Iran, and all of those from Afghanistan. Everybody came in and settled, right? And so, or people will say, oh, well, you're so fair, you're so lucky. Other people will say, oh, you're so lucky you're tanned. You don't have to worry about getting a tan. You have to just accept a lot of those things, because that's what people are. But my thing today is, don't let other people define who you are. When I first came into politics, I chose to run in Surrey and North Delta. I could have run in other places that were maybe much easier to run in. But I chose this area at the time because I wanted to be a role model and show our kids that you can be in Canada, you can be yourself, and you can succeed playing in the Canadian landscape. That you are not an adjunct, you are an integral part of Canada. And this is why when people use names like Indo-Canadians, I don't know why when I hear that term, it makes my blood curdle. How many times do we say, oh, the English Canadian, the German Canadian, the Australian Canadian? We don't do that. But people who are from ethnic minority groups, we say Chinese Canadians. We've started to say Filipino Canadians. We say Indo-Canadians. Except for the First Nations people who inhabit this land, who own, and they let us share this land with them. The rest of us are all either immigrants or descendants of immigrants. So what is it that defines a Canadian? Is it the color of your skin? The food you eat? No. We say we're a multicultural nation. So being a multicultural nation, why is it we have to label people? I am not a hyphenated Canadian. I am a Canadian. I am not a hyphenated person from India either. I'm a mixture of all of those things. I'm very proud of my first language, which is Punjabi, and I've worked my life to learn to read it, write it, speak it. I'm very proud of my history, the bad points as well as the good points. And I'm very excited about the future. But I refuse to be put into a box. When I became president of the BC Teachers Federation, there was a big excitement that a woman had been elected. I think I was the 5th female president of the BCTF of the day, and we've had a few since, so it's all very exciting. But somebody said to me, how do you feel being the first minority person elected to be the president of a large union? And I looked at them and I said, I never thought about it. I'm a teacher, I'm an activist, very proud of the color of my skin and my roots, that doesn't bother me. But I got to be in this position because the membership voted for me. Not because I was better than anybody else, it just happens that's where the votes fell. And so, you know, when we think about the struggles that women have, and I'm very, very conscious of the struggles that are had by all women. Socioeconomic struggles are huge even today. Your income level absolutely determines the doors that are going to open for you and the opportunities you're going to have. If your income level is low and you're a person from we're all visible, so I'm not going to say a visible minority, but from an ethnic group that is other than the mainstream Caucasian, then you are going to be facing challenges as well. But women face challenges no matter the color of their skin. The glass ceiling is still there. You just have to look at the boardroom. Somebody was saying the other day, Patterson doesn't have one female on his board. That was a shocker for me. I didn't know that. It's not because there aren't capable women. So getting back to challenges that we face, the other big challenge for me is when I chose to run in North Delta and Surrey, I didn't realize at the very first meeting we held together that it would be 99% men who turned up to that meeting. And I just looked at the crowd and I thought, where are the women? I'm pleased to say that during my last campaign, it was almost 50-50, men and women, which was good to see. So I think when women run, it does encourage other women to get engaged and get involved. And I think that is a good thing. Yeah. What should be the role of women in politics? Good role. Good role, where we get elected and run for politics because we want to change the world, not because we love the seat or the status. So for me, whether you're male or female, if you're running because you love the status, in Punjabi we have a saying, you love the kursi. If you love the status more than you love the work, please, please do the rest of us a favor and do not run for politics. Do not run for politics. Politics, when you enter the political arena, it's not easy. You are going to have challenges. But if you come into politics wanting to bring about change for the positive, that's great. And whichever political party you choose, that is your individual choice. But make sure it's a progressive one. Yes. Right? And so for me, as I can say one thing about working in Surrey. A lot of people told me it was very, that it can be pretty nasty situation for women. And I've heard some of your stories in this room as well. I don't know whether it's because I had been the president of the BCTF and had been at the BC Federation of Labour as well, at the BCTF I mean, and whether I brought with me that demeanour of a president when we were on strike. I can say that, to my face anyway, people have been respectful and have not crossed that line. But I think that if you're working in a diverse community and you are a woman, you do have to draw a boundary around you. I am a touchy-feely, huggy person, and I go up and hug lots of people. And I can honestly say I have never felt uncomfortable with any behavior so far. And I was saying this to one of you who's sitting in the room, and they said, yeah, that's because they're scared of you. And I think because people know that I will say it right and then to their face. And like if somebody's standing too close to me and I don't want them to, I'll always say, you know what, I have really bad shoulder, or, you know, like I really like a bit of space, and create that space for yourself. So there are challenges when you do come into politics, whether you're male or female. I would say women have far more challenges because of the way we do politics. But I also think that's what makes us so critical to play an equal role. I am so proud to be part of a government where 50% of the cabinet is women, and almost 50% of the caucus is women as well. And then it is working as a team and working on progressive issues. Are you going to get everything your way in politics? No. Sometimes when you're part of a team, you have to suck it up and take a deep breath. And you have to look at what's there for the greater good. Have I had to do that in my life? All the way back to high school. All the way back to high school. I can tell you I had to listen to the people who were telling me how I should and shouldn't behave, and just listen, then go off and do what I had to do. Right? I can see even in the Teachers Federation work, it wasn't easy at the beginning, and some of you are sitting in the room. It was a real struggle, even to get engaged in a meaningful way, and the social justice work and the status of women work is what brought me into that arena, and taught me a lot, And in politics, I feel as long as you are true to your principles, and at the same time pragmatic, you don't have to achieve everything in 1 year. I remember something that I learned when I was at university. When you get in conflict, you have two choices. And I've said this at many a teachers' meetings as well, when we used to do training. When somebody disagrees with you, there's two ways for you to tackle that. You can attack them, tell them how ugly and terrible they are, their thought processes stink, they don't care about humanity, and they are the scum of the earth. And by the time you finish with them, they're going to be even further apart from you than they were before. Or you can listen to them and find out what their issues are, and then use the social justice scale to move them ever so slightly, just with education and importance. And I remember saying in a union meeting that picking up a baseball bat and hitting somebody on the side of their head is not going to change their mind or make them love you. It's really education. It's having those deep conversations. And also, especially those of us who are progressive, and I've got that tendency, so I have to fight it all the time. We want to get everything done today. Even if it's taken us 100 years to get here, or 16, or whatever, we want everything corrected today. And what I always say is that's one of the downfall of the progressive left. that unless I get my issue on the table at the front, we're going to start shooting inwards. And we haven't learned that we can prioritize and work on these issues and then move on. Because in life you can't do everything at the same time. I've also learned, and I learned this through the teaching experiences I've had as both as the president and before, that struggles are not won in a leap. They are won incrementally, then we lose, and then we move forward again. And I can still remember being in, I think it was Costa Rica at a women's conference, and we were telling them everything Harper had stolen from the women's movement. Now he had set the women's movement back decades. And here, after Campbell stripped our collective agreements, what impact that had on us. And I will remember an activist who put her life on risk every single day in her home country. She was from Guatemala, said to me, "This is heartbreaking. We're fighting for what you had, and you guys are giving up without a fight. What we're fighting for." So those are all thoughtful things for us to remember. Rights are won, not once, over and over again. If you think once you've done the fight for social justice or for human rights, it's over, no, it's not. And in drama, they have this analogy. You've got two choices. You can throw yourself on the sword and feel really good as you're bleeding to death, knowing I did the right thing. But you will not live to fight the next day. Or, instead of throwing yourself on the sword, you can reposition. And you can work towards your goal, maybe take a little side step, and then start climbing that mountain again. So to me, those are the lessons that I have learned out of my experiences, whether it's been in the classroom. Used to use the same analogy with the kids even when I was a teacher. Yes, you want to do this. How are you going to get there? Is your path going to be straight up like this? No. You are going to meander along the way, and meandering is okay. And for the women in this room, don't let any man or woman define who you are, or who you should be, or who you can be. I say the same to the boys, by the way,
Yes.
and to the men. Don't let other people define. This is why I say to people, if you've heard something Jenny has said, that you're getting an interpretation, come and ask me. Get into a conversation with me, and I'll explain to you where I'm at on different issues. Do not be scared. Because when you open a door, you walk through it. If you're not happy through that door, there are lots of other doors that you can open. Don't be scared to talk to other women about your feelings, about your struggles. Don't feel they're going to judge you. At the same time, don't think they're going to rescue you either. This is your journey. So let me end now on who is Ginny. Ginny is a true transnational. Born in one continent, India, grew up in England in another continent, and now living in Canada. A proud Canadian, Canadian first, but very much rooted in her history and in her past. And maybe that's where my strength comes from, is because I am comfortable with my skin, with my roots, and with my past. And I am going to fight so that my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren can be who they can be, not who other people want to determine them to be. One of my son, I only have one son. When people look at him, he looks totally not Indian. Those of you who know him in the room, as a matter of fact, when he went door knocking, he had that experience. And my daughter looks the image of me, right? Now I want to tell you something that also I'm very proud of, and maybe because I just have to share this. When my son went door knocking for me in an area of North Delta that's quite non-diverse at the time, he knocked on the door and they said, you know, we're going to vote for your mom because she's the only white person running.
Oh my God. Wow.
And they said, we'll take signs and we'll have lawn signs for our neighbors as well because we're all going to vote for Ginny. And my son could have walked away. He didn't. He said, you need to know I am part Indian and my mother was born in India. She is a Punjabi Sikh and we're very proud of our history. And if you're voting for my mom because of the color of her skin or because of her name, Ginny Sim sounded very English, then, you know, it's really sad. But I'm going to invite you to come and listen to my mom debate. And if after you hear her debate, you want to vote for her, then good for you. 2 families from the cul-de-sac turned up for a debate that was quite raucous. And I cannot really say raucous. There were only 2 women on the panel. There were about 8 of us running at that time. After the meeting had finished, this one family with their 3 kids pulled me to the side. They said to me, you need to be proud of your son because you've made him comfortable in who he is. He's proud of you, and that's why we came to listen to your debate. And based on what we've heard here, and because of your son, we're now going to vote for you because you have principles and integrity. I cried. I still get choked up when I think about that. So let us not judge by looks of a name or by the physical looks of a person. Let us, as we raise our daughters and sons, because we play a critical part in that, raise them to be themselves, rooted to their history, rooted to their presence, and excited about their future. Let us all work together to build a world that is more inclusive, that is more just, and that our children can flourish in. Thank you. Woo!